Hello, John Talley here with Partzilla.com, and what you see before you is a completely disassembled engine out of our 2005 Honda CRF450R. Now in this particular video, we are just going to be focused in on what I call the top end. That's going to be our piston, our cylinder, our head, and cams, and getting all that put together. Now if you need help with the other areas as far as the bottom end and maybe doing the clutch, why don't you reference this unit's playlist and I can walk you through those procedures as well. But before we get started, let's step over and look at the parts that we're going to use to accomplish this task. To do the top end, we're actually using part OEM and part of a kit from Wiseco, which they call the Garage Buddy. Now the Garage Buddy, it goes all the way down to the crankshaft and then gives you all the necessary gaskets and seals and O-rings, as well as pistons, rings, and then the wrist pin as well. It's basically an entire engine rebuild in a box. But with ours, well, we're having to add a couple of OEM pieces. So to do the top end properly, I went ahead and got an OEM cylinder as well as a Honda OEM head, and we're going to go and replace the valves as well. Now we've got all our parts together, let's step over there and I'll show you how to do this project. Now we did go back with just a standard bore size, but I do need to go and check the ring gap clearance because it's a little bit different with the forged Wiseco piston. Any basic tools that will be required, I will call those out as we go along. But you will need a ring gap filer as well as a good set of feeler gauges. Now per the Honda spec, they're looking for a ring gap in between 10 and 12 thousandths. But we are going by the recommendation from Wiseco because this is their piston and it's going to behave a little bit differently than the factory Honda one. And looking at the chart, we're working with a ATV dirt application and they want to see a bore times 0.004. Now we need to convert our 96 millimeters to inches and that works out to 3.78. Once you do that multiplication, the gap that they want to see is 0.015 inches or 15 thousandths. So they want a little bit bigger gap compared to the Honda. So let's go ahead and put in our top ring. We'll use our piston to square it up about 3/4 of an inch down into the bore and see where this one ends up. Let's bring it down to 10. 11. 12 is barely getting in there. 13, that's pretty much going to be a no-go. No, she is really close. 14 is starting to catch. So it's really close. We only need to take off a couple of thousandths. So let me get our grinder clamped down in a vise, and then I'll show you how to file those down just a little bit. So we're set up and ready to go here. The real trick is you want to make sure that you're doing this at a perpendicular angle. And I typically put it in the same orientation as it's going to go in the cylinder, and we're just going to work on this one side. Now keep in mind, we're only having to take off a couple of thousandths, so this is not going to take long. And that right there is probably going to do it. Now before we put it in the cylinder, I want to take a file and just gently chamfer that edge to get off any filings that are hanging on from that process. We're just basically cleaning it back up because we don't want any sharp edges or jagged edges. Drop her back in. Use the piston to square it up. Now let's take a peek. So we knew 13 was going to clear, 14, and we want 15. It's just a little bit tight, so let's do a little bit more and then we'll come back and check it. Working on that same edge, same side, same direction. See if we're at our magic 15 now. That's it. Just have to be patient during that process. Now here's where there's a little bit of difference in between what Wiseco recommends as a general rule and what Honda specifically has for this unit. Now on the Wiseco diagrams, they want you to use the top ring pointing toward one end of the piston wrist pin, second ring going over to the other side, and then they've got it spaced for the oil ring. With this particular setup, there are actually only two rings. We have a top ring and then we have an oil ring for this particular application. So I'm going to go with what Honda recommends, and they want the top ring to be facing toward the exhaust side, which is right here. So the top ring is going to go there. Now for the oil ring itself, it is going to be facing this direction. So we want the oil here, and then the two rings, the top and the bottom, that hold it in place are going to go here, the first one, the top one, and then the second one's going to be in line this direction. So that's the way we're going to put it together. Now that we've got that established, let's go ahead and get this put on the connector rod. Go ahead and put a rag or a towel like I'm doing, just in case one of these wrist pin circlips decides to not cooperate. I'd rather not have to fish it out from the bottom end. So we're going to go ahead and pop in the circlip on this side, get some lube on there, and then we'll attach the other circlip from this side. But the orientation, the Wiseco is marked where it's pointing toward the exhaust side. Now on a factory Honda piston, it actually has an end for the intake, which is over on this side. So don't do it backwards. I usually start with the end of the circlip all the way at the top. You do not want it over in that little gap. I know that may be the easier way to do it, but it's not the right way. And then you just walk it in with your thumb. Now, let's go ahead and put a little bit of lube on the surface where the wrist pin is going to be. Same thing for your connector rod. Get some on our wrist pin. Now, we can start the wrist pin. There she goes. Now we just need to get this other clip in. This is the fun one. And we are going to be pushing against the piston. We do not want to scar it up. It's on that edge. I don't want it to dig in. So we're going to put a little cloth down here where I can get some force in on it. Same scenario, just a little bit tighter. Push in one end and then start walking the other edge around. I am going to reach in and carefully bring that clip in with a screwdriver. There we go. In she went. Just tap on the side of it, make sure it's seated in place. And now we can get our rings on. Now some people do this before they put the piston on. I don't have a problem with doing it afterwards. So let's get our oil ring, the center part, on first. And the only thing you want to be careful of here is to make sure that they don't overlap like this. That needs to butt together, which they're trying to do. You get back here. There. Get back in there. All right, now rotate it around. Let's get one of our O-ring keepers. This one's going on the bottom, so we're going to face it this way. And these, it's okay to spiral on. And we do not want to do that with the top ring. There we go. And this one's going to be in this orientation, 180 degrees out. All right, now you can see how you can compress it in. So that tells me that those two ends are butted up together now. Now for the top ring, we want to take a little bit of oil, just wet your fingers, and go all the way around the ring. You really don't have to get carried away with this. Now we also are looking for that end mark, and we want it facing up. Now if you've got a ring expander, great. If not, you just want to pull it the minimum amount to get it to clear. All right. And now we're pretty much ready to go. I'm going to take just a light layer of oil and wipe it on the piston, especially on the skirts. Next, let's do one final cleaning on the cylinder, because I'll bet you'll be surprised, even out of the box, it'll still need a little bit of cleaning. And our last order of business before we put this together, we're going to wet this down with some oil and just wipe it on the inside of the cylinder. Because I just want a thin layer of oil, that's all. I've seen a lot of builders, they'll just glob a bunch of oil in there. That's not the way I do it. Because I want there to be a certain amount of friction on startup, because that's what's going to get your rings to seat properly. And if you've just got gobs of oil in there, that can't happen. Now we've got our dowels in place, and do not forget this little water passageway, that little collar that goes in. And now you're just going to gently lay in your gasket. Looking good. It's time to get a cylinder on here, guys and girls. All I'm doing here is just squeezing in the rings. I get the front edge to go in first, where the gaps where the ring comes together, and then start working it in toward the back. Take your time, do not force anything. The rings are up in there. Now, let's go ahead and bring that chain up. Well, I'm just going to hold that like that and then seat it. Lined up on our dowels, but she's fighting me a little bit. There she goes. Touchdown. Now at this stage, there's really only one bolt to hold it in place, and it's just this 8mm over on the side. The real trick in all of this is to be patient and not to force it, because those rings are so thin. It can be easy if you get in a hurry to bend one of them, and then you pretty much have to order another set and start over. So take your time doing this part. And we're going to torque that one to 7 foot-pounds. We want to finish off by bringing it up to top dead center. That's probably pretty close. And we are at top dead center. And you verify that by matching up this timing mark with that dot right inside here. And you can also verify it on the other side by looking at the rotor down in there. We're within those two timing marks. Now we'll go verify this again when we actually go to do the camshaft installation. So let's put this to the side for right now and go bring over the head. Okay, before we tear into this, I want to make a few observations or notes. Now, granted, I'm putting in new valves and I'm going with the OEM. And what's important to note is the intakes are titanium, so you do not lap these in. Now, granted, this is a new head. There probably won't be any lapping required, but we are going to at least check it with Prussian Blue. Now on the exhaust side, those are stainless and they can be lapped in if necessary. Other thing you need to note is your keepers are going to be different sizes going from intake to exhaust, as well as those upper buckets that they go into. Other thing we need to note is in our kit, we've got the valve stem seals, but also keep in mind they're different sizes from intake to exhaust. So you just need to be aware and don't swap those from one side to the other. Now, as far as the tools go, you are going to need to get a valve spring compressor. Other than that is a shim kit. Inside of this, it's going to have all the different shims and different variations and sizes and thicknesses that's going to get yours into spec. So now we're going to clamp our spring compressor in the vise, and then we're going to remove our springs and the keepers and everything else we need to transfer over to the new head. Now the compressor that I'm going to be using is actually made by Motion Pro, and there's a couple of different heads that you can order this with, so be aware of that when ordering yours. So we'll start off with our intakes first. This is where a magnet comes in handy. Well, I was not expecting this. I knew somebody had been into this engine. We had discussed that, but apparently they decided to go with a dual spring setup, and I'm not sure what manufacturer this is. I can't tell just by looking at it, but it did not come from Honda, built like this. So all right guys, we have got the correct springs now, and the keepers and the collars and the washers and everything that we're going to need to get this thing put back together. So there's no reason for me to go any further pulling this head apart. We're not going with the system. I want to take it back to OEM because I don't know the history on this one. So that's why we're going back to what I know best. But just for fun, I do want to mark it with Prussian Blue and just show you where the valves make contacts with the seats. I mean, all of this is from the factory. It should be perfect, but I'm just going to go through it anyway just to show you. Now, if you are going to modify your head and go with different valves, maybe different springs, resist the temptation to do what they call, polishing the port, especially on the intake. You don't want to do that because they actually designed it to have a rougher surface, almost like the surface of a golf ball, and that makes the flow work actually better. So you do not want to smooth that out. Leave it alone. If you want to smooth out anything, you could do the exhaust port, but Honda's really thought this through, so you shouldn't have to mess with it. So what we're going to do is put a little Prussian Blue just on the surface. It's a 3-angle cut. Bring it around and just pop our valve a couple of times, and then you'll be able to see the contact area because it's going to transfer over the Prussian Blue to the valve face. I'm going to go ahead and put it on the exhaust side as well. As predicted, nice wide even band all the way around. It just about covers the entire valve face. So yeah, that doesn't need to be touched. And as I said, on the intake, those are titanium and you do not lap these in. So chances are this one's going to seal up just fine. Now if you don't have any Prussian Blue, another trick you can use, just a Sharpie. We'll do the same procedure just for fun. Trick is to do it quickly before the stuff has a chance to dry. There you go. You can see that even better. See how it runs it out to the edge? These don't need to be touched. Well, those two techniques confirmed what we already knew. Let me get this cleaned up and we'll start putting it together. So I've got everything laid out on the table the way it's supposed to go in. Let's get in all 4 of our spring seats. They're actually the same. That's the only thing that they share from the intake to the exhaust. You definitely want to pop those on before you put on your seals. Now let's go ahead and pop those in. Not that tough to do. You can just do this with your finger. And we're going to Put just a little bit of oil in each seal and let it go down into the guide. Wipe off any excess. Now, the springs. Now, these have paint on the top of them, but if yours did not, if they've worn that off, you'll notice that the winding is a little bit more tight at the bottom than at the top, and that's the side we want down. And obviously, there's a big difference in between the intake and the exhaust, both in height and in diameter. So in other words, yes, you have to match your valve to whatever spring it should be with. So that's why we had to replace all of it to make sure everything is designed to work together. So what we're going to do is bring in our first valve, turn it a little bit as you're pushing it through the seal so it doesn't damage it. Spring goes there, retainer goes up top, and what I'll do once I compress it is put a little bit of grease on the tip of the keeper, and that will allow it to more or less stay attached to my screwdriver so I can get it in position. Now you can also do that with the magnet, but this little trick works pretty well for me. Now to get those to seat, I just want to give it a little bit of a pop just to seat them in there. All right. Let's just do that 3 more times. I'll be honest with y'all, this is the first time I've used this Motion Pro spring compressor, and I love it. I mean, this thing is so easy to use. I mean, usually this is much more of a challenge. This makes it easy. That is a beautiful sight. Love the look of shiny new aluminum and titanium and a little bit of steel. Yeah, I know it's brand new, but as I said before, clean it up before you assemble it. There's only 2 more pieces we need to get off of this water tube, which is part of the cooling system, and then of course the intake boot. I'm not super thrilled about the way this is coming off. This rubber's about hard as a brick, so that'll probably get replaced. I'll go ahead and remove it, but yeah, that's starting to get a little crunchy. So I may or may not use that when we do the final installation. This, we'll clean it up. Pretty sure I've already got that O-ring in the Wiseco kit, and it'll be good to go. And we are done with this old one. It is time to close this engine up. Just for fun, we'll autograph this one. Yeah, that's going to last about a second. So let's get in our chain guide, and the trick is there's a groove that this part needs to go into. Just make sure it actually goes in there, and verify that by looking down there with a flashlight. All right, now we need to oil up this chain because we never did when we first installed it. So let's let gravity do a little bit of work for us here. Now, if you were just doing a top-end job, you wouldn't have to go through this because your chain would probably already be oiled, but hey, a little bit more won't hurt. But this is a new chain, so I need to make sure it's saturated. That should do it. Last chance to make sure that all this is clean. Let's grab our dowels. Next, let's get our head gasket in place. All right, we're just pulling the chain up That way the guides can move a little, and then we can bring the head down. There we go. May have to wiggle it just a little bit to get it to line up on the dowels. There we go. Touchdown. Cleaning up our washers one more time. Make sure there's no dirt on them. And then we're going to lube them up because we don't want any friction throwing off the torque. All right, they're oiled up everywhere. All right, let's get it seated. We're going to torque these to 44 foot-pounds, and we'll do it in a couple of steps. We'll start off at just 10, go back and forth in a crisscross pattern, then take them up to 30, and then finish them off at 44. Now that everything's torqued down on the main bolts, we can go ahead and install these two 8mm and get those torqued down. Our favorite number, 7 foot-pounds. We're also going to go back and check that one at the bottom, because I'm betting, now that we've got everything torqued, that one's going to be a little bit loose. Not much. So now, let's start working with our, I guess you call it a cam housing, cam enclosure. And since we're dealing with all new valves, all the clearances, there's no way it's going to match up to, what we had before. But we have to get a starting point. So I'm just going to take the old shims that came out, pop those in, mount up the cover, do a quick measurement, and then adjust accordingly. Tell you what, we're just going to leave you out of the equation for right now. So let's re-verify that we are still at top dead center. All right, we're sure we're at top dead center, and we just want to install this. Keep your fingers under the buckets, and we want the lobes to be facing up. All right. We're going to pop these in. Long ones in the front, short ones back here. And it looks like my intakes are hitting, so I won't be able to measure those. But I can get a measurement on the exhaust because I've got a gap there. So let's pull it back off, cut down our size on the intakes, or the thickness on the intakes, and we'll try that again because, yeah, they're in constant contact. Hey, it happens when you're trying to do this from scratch. You got to get to a 0 point, but you can't start with a shim that's too large. Otherwise, you're not measuring any distance at all. It kind of defeats the purpose of clearance, doesn't it? Going back and forth, it is really easy for one of those shims to get caught in one of the buckets and potentially go down into the engine. And I'd rather not have that happen. So we're going to take a paper towel and just put it right there. Get your fingers under the buckets, and out they come. Now, see what I'm talking about? One of them stayed, and the other one decided to go for a ride on the bucket. All right, what did they have here to begin with? All right, one of them's a little bit hard to read, but they look like they were in the 250 range. So let's drop it down to 165. Let's see if that gets us to where we can measure it. And get those torqued down to 10 foot-pounds. All right, let's get everybody to seat down. And our magic numbers we were looking for is 6/1000 of an inch, of course, on the intake and 11 on the exhaust. So let's just see what we got. Oh, there it is. There's my 6 on one side and on my other. See how it's grabbing it just a little bit? That's what we want. So we are dead on it. And we want 11 on the exhaust. Yeah, it was grabbing it just a bit. That's her. But what I do want to do is at least take out these 4 bolts, oil them, and then retorque them, because we actually put it in there without any lubrication, and that can throw off the torque value a little bit. And then we need to put assembly lube over all of this, especially on the lobes, because that's the part that's going to contact. If we were putting this together and I was going to slam it in the machine and start it up in a day or two, you could get away with oil. But it's going to be a little while before we actually do a first start. And that's why assembly lube is so important, because it's like the consistency of honey, and it's going to stay on the parts longer and better. Now when we do get this one buttoned up and put back in the frame, we'll run it through its first heat cycle. At that point, I'll come back and check the valve clearance again with everything really seated in. Now, we just need to put on the timing gear, set the timing, bring that chain back up. Let's re-verify that we are still at top dead center. And she moved just a little bit, not far. To grab it from this side, you can use just an 8mm Allen. Now, let's get to business here. So the marks we're wanting to line up, we've actually got 2 marks on the gear, and then you'll see 2 arrows here on the cam housing. And that's what we're going for. And we don't have a tensioner in right now, so we want to make sure this side of the chain is pulled taut. Let's walk it around. Looks like I need one more. And that is probably going to be it. Let's take a peek down on our timing mark, see if it moved at all. Yeah, it moved just a tick. So let's. That is it. Now, we do want to use some blue Loctite on these 2. Make sure they're cleaned up with all the old Loctite removed. All right, we'll do our final torque on that in a minute. What I want to do next is go ahead and get our tensioner in place, because I don't want it to try to jump time on me. What I need to do here is remove this end bolt, because we have to pull the tension back using just a flat blade. Now the trick here is we need to wind this tensioner in, hold it there until we get it fully installed, then release it. So a little tricky, but we'll get it done. Now you can release it. Wasn't that fun? Then we're going to torque each one of these to 7. All right. Before we torque this down, I just want to rotate it around once, just to make sure everybody's happy. Looking good, or sounding good. Now, we need to get those torqued to 15. I'm just holding it using the counter shaft, because we're only talking about 15 foot-pounds here. I don't think that upset anybody too bad. Now at this point we can put our inspection plugs back in. Make sure you've got your O-ring in place. All right guys, we're getting really close now. The last thing I want to do, of course, we're replacing the main seal, but we're also replacing the seals up top that the bolts actually go through. Now these are more or less glued in. We just want to put a little bit of Honda Bond down into that channel, then press them in, then it'll be ready to go. But we want to do one final cleaning. Make sure there's no debris in there so the new seals will have a clean place to adhere to. Now I'm actually using a 3-bond equivalent to the Honda Bond, but it's up to you as to which one you want to go with. And I do advise get some gloves because you will make a mess. Doesn't have to be a lot, just get it sealed up. One more. See if I can do this without getting any on my ungloved hand. Good to go. There is one more on the bottom, or actually on the inside, that goes around that channel where the spark plug tube is. And it doesn't seem to have any glue on it. So I think we can just press in our new one. Oop, lost one. Get our new main seal in place. Tell you what, before we close it up, let's add in a little bit more assembly lube. Okay, now I think we're ready. These can be a little tricky to line up. We're just going to get them hand tight. There you go. All we need to do now is fill it up with some oil, put a spark plug in it, then reinstall it in the machine. Now, if you'd like to see that happen, why don't you go ahead and hit that subscribe button. That way you'll be notified when we finish up that video and set it live. Well, listen, if you need any of these parts for your machine, why don't you come see us at Partzilla.com and we can get you taken care of. If you have any questions or comments, leave them in the section below and I'll do my best to answer them. And listen, we just want to say thank you for shopping here with us at Partzilla, and we will see you in the next video. Y'all have a great day.